All right, today it's a little interview with Mike, which I know since 1996. That's
Wow.
when we probably did our first dissection together on our old ranch. Yep, time flies by when we're having fun. So he taught me everything about dissecting and helped me a lot with the hoof, and he's been extremely generous. And my question to Mike, because I'm always interested, there are people that really have a passion for what they do. And I would like to know, what on earth did you get started with that and spend so much time in fine details? What was your journey?
Well, it's quite a story.
Go ahead. We have time.
Well, my grandfather farmed with horses when I was very young, so I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember him having horses all the time. And so I'd go back to Michigan and help him on the farm. And I just have always liked horses.
You're
Yeah, so I would go back there in the summers and help him. And my uncle had a farm also. They farmed soybeans and wheat and corn.
old were you?
Oh, I've been going back there since I was 2 years old, probably.
Okay, it started young. The madness started young.
Yeah. I don't remember. I didn't do much when I was that young, but as I got older, more into junior high school and or sixth, seventh grade, I would go back and help him, and then come home for the school year. And I've just always liked horses. And then my wife's grandfather farmed with horses, large scale farming. He quit farming large scale in 1938, which I wasn't around in those years.
Okay, it's
But
not that ancient.
yeah, exactly. But a lot of the stuff were on the ranch, on his ranch, and we had horses there also. So I just have been around them for a long time, and there's something about a horse um, that's really attracts you to them if you really like them, and I got that attraction at a very early age.
And you were riding horses pretty young.
Yes, I've worked with horses. I had jobs in the summer when I was going to college, um, working on dude ranches.
Okay.
The one ranch I worked on had 114 head of horses, all saddled and that stuff. And so that gave me a lot of fun in the summer. I always look forward to the summer of going back there and working. And like I say, of course, I had my own horses. I had cattle, and so I used my horses to work the cows. Oh, how I learned to shoe horses is an interesting story. I asked my father one time if I could have horses, and he said, sure. How are you going to pay for them? And I said, well, I'll figure that one out. And he says, well, you can have them if you can pay for them. So a good friend of mine, we built corrals, and we went up to Sparks, Nevada, at a ranch outside of Sparks, and I bought my first two horses there, and then we hauled them all the way back, and then they were 2-year-olds, so I had to break them, which I didn't know much about breaking horses. But just down the river from me was a fella that trained hunters and jumpers, and so I would go down and ask him questions if I had any questions. And so the area I grew up in was a small area at the time, and you could hear it was a valley, and you could hear an anvil from a long ways off. So whenever I would hear an anvil, I would just head that way and find the farrier. There was only 2 farriers that came into that area in those years. And I would bug them, and they would tell me this and tell me that. So I started trimming my own horses to save money. And I learned a lot. If I couldn't ride them the next day, I knew I went a little too much. So I learned to back off and just be a little easier on the trim. And then I eventually, when I went to school down at Cal Poly in San Luis, I took the Farrier science class with Gene Armstrong. And that was fun. And he was a very good instructor, taught a lot about horse handling and how to get along with horses. And that's pretty important to know. And so then I would go work on that dude ranch. We had to all the wranglers had to shoe our own horses. So we'd shoe after the end of the day, we'd shoe some horses and then go eat. that was a fun job.
And then when did you switch from just
Oh, well, when I got then from there, from the dude ranches, I decided there's more to learn.
right,
So I went to a horseshoeing school at Oregon State in Corvallis. The instructor's name was Lee McDaniels. And he was a pretty tough instructor, but a very good one. And so I put all those two together and just started shoeing horses, going around. I went down and started teaching at Cal Poly and Pomona at the Kellogg Arabian Horse Center, which is located on campus.
right,
And I just started learning. I noticed that the things I was taught in school really weren't good enough for me to know. I needed to know more than what I learned. So I just started studying. The school gave me free rein. They had a lot of respect for what I did. So they didn't really interfere with any of the research
right.
I wanted to do. And as long as it was safe, I always have to deal with the public and horses. And I just learned. I just taught myself pretty much everything I know.
So when did you start formulating, trimming to the sole plane?
Okay, that's a good one.
What's
I
kind of got
wasn't
you?
taught any of that. The
Okay,
soap plane wasn't even discussed at the time. So in my quest for knowledge, I had several students a year in my classes. My classes were 16 students per class. I taught, and it was for college students, not for to teach professional
right,
horseshoeing, but it was a general ed class at the time. And so I taught Farrier science, and I used dead legs. I couldn't put them on the horses to trim because they were a little valuable. So until I felt comfortable with how they use their tools and things, they worked on dead legs.
right,
And they had to dissect. Every student usually dissected at least two, trimmed a foot and dissected a foot, at least two per class. Um, had 3 classes in the semesters, and then I had 2 workshops in the summers. Each class had 16. I did that for 30 years. So that's a lot of feet to get under and study. And when they had something I didn't recognize or didn't understand, I just took the leg home with me
right.
and studied it at home. I
Uh,
used to have at least 100 to 150 buckets of dead legs soaking in buckets.